The morning sky over New Haven Colony looked wrong. Instead of the usual purple dawn that painted the horizon, angry red streaks cut through the clouds like wounds. Danny Walsh pressed his face against the window of his family's small apartment and watched the strange lights dance across the sky. "Danny, get away from there," his mother Lisa called from the kitchen. Her voice carried a worry that made Danny's stomach tighten. "Help me pack these food containers." Danny grabbed his crutches and made his way to the kitchen. His left leg had never worked right since he was born, and the metal supports under his arms had become as much a part of him as his own hands. The crutches clicked against the metal floor of their home with each step. "What are those lights?" "Mom?" Danny asked as he reached for a container of dried fruit. "Lisa?" Walsh looked at her 12-year-old son and tried to smile. "Just some space rocks burning up in the sky. Nothing to worry about?" But Danny could see the lie in her eyes. His mother's hands shook as she sealed the food containers. Outside, the red streaks were getting bigger and brighter, the colony's emergency alarm began to wail. The sound cut through the morning air like a scream. Danny had heard it before during practice drills, but this time it felt different. This time it meant something real was happening. "Lisa, get the kids ready now." Danny's father, Pete Walsh, burst through the front door. His mining uniform was covered in dust and his face was pale. "We have to leave, all of us, right now." "Leave?" Danny's 8-year-old sister Katie ran into the room, her dark hair still messy from sleep. "Where are we going?" "On a trip, sweetheart," Pete said, but his voice was tight. "A big ship is coming to take us somewhere safe." Through the window, Danny could see people running in the streets. Families carried bags and boxes toward the center of the colony. Children cried as their parents hurried them along. The red streaks in the sky were no longer just streaks. They were getting closer, and Danny could see they were rocks on fire. "Those aren't just space rocks," Danny said quietly. "Those are meteors. Big ones." His parents looked at him with surprise. Danny spent most of his time reading while other kids played sports. He knew about space and planets and the dangerous things that flew between them. "How long do we have?" Lisa asked Pete. "Captain Morrison says maybe 2 hours before the big ones hit," Pete replied. "The transport ship Horizon's Edge is landing at the main pad. Everyone needs to be there in 1 hour." Danny felt his heart race. He looked at his crutches and then at the bags his parents were packing. Moving fast was not something he did well. The walk to the main landing pad usually took him 30 minutes when he had all day to make the trip. "I'll slow everyone down." Danny said. "No, you won't," Pete said firmly. He knelt down and looked his son in the eyes. "We're a family. We stick together, always." The alarm kept wailing as the Walsh family packed their most important things. Danny put his books about space and planets into a small bag. Katie grabbed her favorite stuffed animal, a purple creature that looked like the friendly animals that lived in New Haven's forests. Outside, the noise was getting louder. People shouted to each other as they ran through the streets. Danny heard the sound of engines starting up and the heavy footsteps of the mining machines being moved to help with the evacuation. "Danny, can you carry this?" Lisa handed him a small bag of medical supplies. "And stay close to Katie." "I will, Mom." The family left their apartment and joined the stream of people moving toward the main landing pad. Danny tried to keep up, but his crutches slipped on the smooth metal pathways. Each step sent a jolt of pain through his arms and shoulders. Katie stayed beside him, even when their parents moved ahead to help an elderly neighbor carry her bags. Other families passed them, children running alongside their parents while Danny struggled to maintain his pace. "You can do it, Danny," Katie said. "Look, I can see the ship." Danny looked up and saw the Horizon's Edge settling onto the landing pad. The ship was huge, bigger than any building in the colony. Its engines glowed bright blue against the red sky. Steam rose from the ground where the hot metal touched down, but as Danny watched, the red streaks in the sky grew brighter. Some of them were close enough now that he could see they were rocks the size of houses, burning as they fell through the atmosphere. The first small ones began to hit the ground outside the colony, sending up clouds of dust and smoke. "Hurry!" Pete called back to them. "The loading has started." Danny pushed himself harder, his crutches clicking rapidly against the ground. His arms ached and sweat ran down his face, but he kept moving. Around him, other families were doing the same thing. Parents carried young children, and older kids helped carry bags. The loading ramp of the horizon's edge was down, and people were streaming into the ship. Danny could see Captain Morrison standing at the entrance, helping people, aboard and checking names off a list. The captain was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that looked worried. "The Walsh family," Pete called out as they approached. "Good to see you, Pete," Captain Morrison said. "Get your family aboard. We're running out of time." Danny was almost to the ramp when the first big meteor hit. The impact was about a mile away, but the ground shook so hard that Danny lost his balance. His crutches slipped and he fell to his knees. The sound was like thunder and an explosion mixed together. Dust and smoke rose from where the meteor had hit, and Danny could feel the heat from the impact on his face. "Danny!" Katie screamed. Pete ran back and helped his son to his feet. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," Danny said, though his knees were scraped. And his arms shook from the effort of trying to stay upright. More meteors were falling now, closer to the colony. Each impact sent tremors through the ground. The red sky was full of burning rocks, and Danny realized they looked like angry eyes staring down at them. "Move, move, move!" Captain Morrison shouted. "Everyone aboard now." Danny climbed the ramp, with his family, his crutches echoing on the metal surface. Inside the ship, people were finding seats and securing their belongings. The air smelled like fuel and fear. Through the ship's windows, Danny could see the colony he had called home his whole life. The small buildings, the mining equipment, the paths where he had learned to walk with his crutches. Everything looked tiny and fragile under the burning sky. Another meteor hit, this one closer. The ship shook, and Danny heard the captain ordering the crew to prepare for immediate departure. "Will we ever come back?" Katie asked, pressing close to Danny. Danny looked out at the falling stars and the place where they had lived. He thought about all the paths through the colony he knew by heart, all the quiet places where he had gone to read and think. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but we'll be okay. We're together." The ship's engines began to power up with a deep rumble that Danny could feel in his bones. Outside, the meteor shower was getting worse. The colony's buildings were starting to catch fire from the smaller impacts. Captain Morrison's voice came over the ship's speakers. "All passengers secure for departure. We lift off in 5 minutes." Danny gripped his crutches tighter and looked at his family. His parents sat close together, holding hands. Katie leaned against him, her stuffed animal clutched to her chest. They were scared, but they were together. The red sky outside grew brighter as more meteors fell. Danny closed his eyes and hoped they would make it off the ground before the really big ones hit. The horizon's edge lifted off from the landing pad just as another meteor struck the colony's outer buildings. Danny felt the ship shake as the engines fought against the planet's gravity. Through the small window beside his seat, he watched the ground fall away below them. "We made it," Katie whispered, still holding her stuffed animal tight, but Danny noticed something wrong. Captain Morrison was talking quietly to his crew members, and their faces looked worried. The ship was supposed to be heading straight up into space, away from the meteor storm. Instead, it felt like they were flying sideways, staying close to the planet's surface. "Why aren't we going up?" Danny asked his father. Pete Walsh looked toward the front of the ship where the captain stood. "I don't know, son. Maybe they need to check something first." The ship's speakers crackled to life. "This is Captain Morrison. We have a problem. Our sensors show 3 colonists are still on the ground. We're going back." Danny's heart sank. Going back meant flying through the meteor storm again. It meant more danger for everyone on the ship. He looked around at the other passengers and saw the same worry on their faces. "Who's still down there?" someone called out. "We're checking now," the captain replied. "Everyone please remain seated." First Officer Amy Carter moved through the passenger area with a tablet, checking names. Danny watched her face grow more serious as she counted. When she reached their section, she stopped and looked at her list again. "The Miller family," she announced. Frank Miller, his wife Rose, and their teenage son Ben. They were supposed to be on the transport, but they're not here. Danny knew the Miller family. Frank Miller worked with his father in the mines. Rose Miller helped teach the younger children in the colony school. Ben was 16 and had always been kind to Danny, never making fun of his crutches like some of the other kids did. "We have to go back for them," Danny said. "It's too dangerous," Lisa Walsh said, putting her hand on Danny's shoulder. "The meteors are getting worse." Through the windows, Danny could see she was right. The red streaks in the sky were now like a rain of fire. Some meteors were as big as the buildings in the colony. When they hit the ground, they left craters and started fires that spread quickly. The ship turned around and headed back toward the landing pad. Danny felt his stomach drop as they flew lower. The colony looked different now. Several buildings were on fire, and the neat pathways between them were covered with rocks and debris. "There," First Officer Carter pointed toward a section of the colony that was still intact. "The Miller house is in that area, but the landing pad is damaged. We can't set down there." Captain Morrison studied the ground below them. "We'll hover as low as we can. Someone will have to go down and get them." "I'll go," said Tony Rodriguez, the ship's chief engineer. He was a big man with strong arms and a brave heart. "I can rappel down and bring them back up." "It's too dangerous alone," said Dr. Helen Parker, the colony's doctor who was also on the ship. "I'll go with you. If someone is hurt, they'll need medical help." Danny watched as Tony and Dr. Parker prepared to go back down to the colony. They put on protective gear and checked their equipment. The ship's crew lowered them on ropes toward the Miller house, but as they got closer to the ground, the meteor storm got worse. A big rock hit near the landing pad, and the explosion sent a shockwave through the air. The ship shook so hard that Danny was thrown against his seat. "Pull them back up," Captain Morrison shouted. "It's too dangerous." Tony and Dr. Parker were lifted back into the ship just as another meteor hit the colony. This one was huge, bigger than any of the others. It struck the main power plant, and the explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. "The landing pad is gone," First Officer Carter reported. "The whole area is unstable." Danny looked out the window and saw that she was right. Where the landing pad had been, there was now a crater full of twisted metal and burning debris. The path to the Miller house was blocked by fallen buildings. "We can't leave them," Danny said. "We may have to," Captain Morrison said sadly. "I won't risk the lives of everyone on this ship." The ship climbed higher to avoid the worst of the meteor storm. Danny pressed his face against the window and searched the colony below for any sign of the Miller family. The fires were spreading, and smoke covered much of the settlement. "Wait," Katie said suddenly. "I see something." She pointed to a section of the colony that was still standing. 3 small figures were moving between the buildings, trying to find shelter from the falling meteors. "That's them," Danny said. "That's the Miller family." Captain Morrison looked through binoculars. "You're right. They're alive, but they're trapped. The meteors have blocked all the main paths." "What about the maintenance tunnels?" Danny asked. Everyone looked at him. The maintenance tunnels were small passages that ran under the colony, connecting all the buildings. They were used by repair workers to fix pipes and electrical systems. "Those tunnels are too small for adults," Pete Walsh said. "And they're probably damaged by now, but they might still work," Danny said. "And someone small might be able to get through them." "It's too dangerous," Lisa said firmly. "No one is going back down there." The ship shook again as more meteors hit the colony. Through the windows, Danny could see the Miller family running from building to building, trying to avoid the falling rocks. They looked so small and helpless from up in the sky. "We have to do something," Danny said. "We can't just watch them." "The boy is right," said an old voice from the back of the ship. It was George Cooper, whose twin grandsons Sam and Alex were on the ship. "We can't leave people behind. That's not what humans do, but what can we do?" First Officer Carter asked. "The landing pad is destroyed. The paths are blocked. Even if we could get someone down there, how would they get back up?" Danny thought about the colony and all the places he had explored during his 12 years of life. While other kids played sports and games, he had spent his time learning every corner of the settlement. He knew the maintenance tunnels better than anyone. The emergency shaft, Danny said suddenly. The Building 7 has an emergency shaft that goes straight up to the surface. It's big enough for people to climb, and it connects to the main tunnel system. Captain Morrison looked at him with surprise. How do you know about that? I've been in those tunnels, Danny said. I know the way. Absolutely not, Pete Walsh said. You're not going back down there. Dad, I'm the only one who knows the way, Danny argued. And I'm small enough to fit through the passages that might be blocked. With your crutches? Lisa asked. Danny, you can barely walk on flat ground. How would you manage in damaged tunnels? Danny looked at his crutches and then at his family. His mother was right. The tunnels would be dark and dangerous. There would be debris and maybe flooding. It would be the hardest thing he had ever tried to do, but when he looked out the window at the Miller family, he saw Ben Miller helping his father walk. Frank Miller was hurt, probably from falling debris. Rose Miller was carrying emergency supplies. They were a family, just like his own family. I have to try, Danny said. They would do the same for us. Another meteor hit close to where the Miller family was hiding. The building they were in caught fire, and Danny could see them running toward another shelter. We're running out of time, Captain Morrison said. That area won't be safe much longer. Danny made a decision that would change everything. He stood up on his crutches and looked at the captain. Put me down near Building 7, he said. I'll get them out. The ship fell silent except for the sound of the engines and the distant explosions from the meteor storm. Everyone was looking at Danny, the boy who had always been the slowest to walk, the one who needed help climbing stairs. It's too dangerous, his mother said again. Mom, Danny said quietly, sometimes the most dangerous thing is doing nothing at all. The ship's passenger area was completely quiet. Everyone stared at Danny as he stood with his crutches, volunteering to go back into the meteor storm. Outside the windows, the colony burned while rocks the size of cars fell from the red sky. No, Pete Walsh said firmly. I won't let my son go back down there. Dad, they need help, Danny said. The Miller family is trapped. Then I'll go, Pete said. I'm stronger than you. I can move faster. You don't know the tunnels like I do, Danny replied. You've never been in them. Captain Morrison looked at his instruments. We have maybe 20 minutes before the really big meteors hit. After that, nothing on the planet's surface will survive. Through the windows, Danny could see the Miller family had found shelter in a small building, but meteors were hitting all around them. Each impact sent up clouds of dust and debris. The building they were in had scorch marks on its walls from the heat of nearby strikes. I know every tunnel in the colony, Danny said. I know which ones connect to which buildings. I know the emergency exits. With your crutches? Lisa asked, tears in her eyes. Danny, those tunnels will be dark and full of debris. What if you fall? What if you get stuck? Danny looked at his crutches and felt doubt creep into his mind. His mother was right. He was not fast. He was not strong. He fell down sometimes even on smooth floors. The tunnels would be dangerous for anyone, but especially for him. Maybe there's another way, First Officer Carter said. Maybe we can clear a path with the ship's engines? Too risky, Captain Morrison said. The backwash could collapse more buildings, Tony Rodriguez spoke up. What if we lower someone else down? Someone younger and smaller than me? I'm the only one who knows the tunnels, Danny said again. I spent years exploring them while other kids played games. I know every turn, every junction, every emergency exit. George Cooper stood up from his seat. The boy is right. Sometimes the person who seems least likely to help is the one who can help the most. Danny looked at his family. His father's face was hard with worry. His mother was crying. Katie held her stuffed animal and looked scared. I'm sorry, Danny said, but I have to try. Captain Morrison made the decision. We'll lower you down near Building 7. You'll have a radio to stay in contact with us. But if things get too dangerous, you come back immediately. I will, Danny promised. The ship's crew prepared the rescue equipment. They gave Danny a small radio, a flashlight, and a rope. Dr. Parker showed him how to use an emergency medical kit in case the Miller family was hurt. The tunnels might be flooded, Tony Rodriguez warned, or blocked by debris. If you can't get through, don't try to force it. I understand, Danny said. The ship flew lower, fighting against the winds created by the meteor impacts. Danny could feel the heat from the fires below through the ship's hull. The colony looked like a war zone now, with craters and burning buildings everywhere. There's Building 7, First Officer Carter pointed to a structure that was still standing but surrounded by debris. The ship hovered as low as it could while the crew lowered Danny on a rope. As he got closer to the ground, he could see the damage up close. The neat pathways he had walked on all his life were cracked and covered with rocks. The air smelled like smoke and hot metal. Danny's feet touched the ground near Building 7. He unclipped the rope and looked around. The building's main entrance was blocked by fallen debris, but he knew another way in. Danny, can you hear me? Captain Morrison's voice came through the radio. I can hear you, Danny replied. I'm going to the maintenance entrance. Danny made his way around the building on his crutches. The ground was rough and uneven from the meteor impacts, and he had to be careful not to slip on the loose rocks. A small meteor hit about 50 yards away, and the shock wave nearly knocked him down. He found the maintenance entrance, a small door that led to the building's basement. The door was damaged but not blocked. Danny pushed it open and looked into the darkness beyond. The tunnel was narrow and low, just as he remembered, but now it was partly filled with water from broken pipes. Debris floated in the murky water, and Danny could hear the sound of more water rushing somewhere in the distance. I'm in the tunnel, Danny reported on the radio. There's some flooding, but I can get through. Danny started moving through the tunnel, using his crutches to test the depth of the water and to feel for obstacles in the dark. The flashlight cast strange shadows on the tunnel walls, and every sound echoed loudly in the confined space. The tunnel connected to the main maintenance system under the colony. Danny had explored these passages many times, but they looked different now. Some sections were flooded, others were blocked by fallen debris. The familiar landmarks were gone or changed, but Danny kept moving. He knew that if he went straight for about 100 yards, then turned right at the main junction, he would reach the area under the Miller house. From there, he could find the emergency shaft that led to the surface. The water got deeper as he moved forward. Soon it was up to his knees, and his crutches slipped on the wet tunnel floor. Danny fell once, soaking his clothes and scraping his hands on the rough concrete. Danny, are you all right? His father's voice came through the radio. I'm okay. Dad, Danny replied, though he was cold and wet and his arms ached from the effort of moving through the flooded tunnel. He reached the main junction and turned right. This tunnel was drier, but it was filled with debris from the meteor impacts above. Danny had to climb over fallen pipes and around chunks of concrete that had fallen from the ceiling. I'm getting close, Danny reported. I can hear them above. As he moved forward, Danny could indeed hear voices from above. The Miller family was somewhere up there, trapped in their damaged house while meteors continued to fall around them, but then Danny reached a section of tunnel that was completely blocked. A large piece of concrete had fallen from the ceiling, and water was backing up behind it. There was no way through. Danny sat down on his crutches and looked at the obstacle. He was tired and cold and his arms hurt. The easy path was blocked, and he didn't know if there was another way. Danny, what's your status? Captain Morrison asked over the radio. The main tunnel is blocked, Danny said. I need to find another way. Danny thought about the colony's layout. He had spent so much time in these tunnels that he knew them like the rooms of his own house. There was another tunnel, a smaller one that ran parallel to the main system. It was used for electrical cables and was very narrow, but it might still be open. I'm going to try the electrical tunnel, Danny said. Be careful, his mother's voice came through the radio. We love you. I love you too, Mom, Danny said. Danny backtracked to a junction he had passed earlier. The electrical tunnel was there, just as he remembered. It was even smaller than the main tunnel, barely wide enough for him to crawl through. Danny left his crutches behind. In the narrow tunnel, they would only get in the way. He would have to crawl on his hands and knees, dragging his weak leg behind him. The electrical tunnel was dark and cramped. Danny's flashlight barely lit the space ahead of him. He crawled forward slowly, his knees scraping on the rough floor. Water dripped from the ceiling, and he could hear the sound of meteors hitting the ground above, but Danny kept going. He thought about the Miller family, waiting for help. He thought about Ben Miller, who had always been kind to him. He thought about Frank Miller, who worked with his father and told funny stories during lunch breaks, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Danny reached the area under the Miller house. He found the emergency shaft, a vertical tunnel that led straight up to the surface. At the top, he could see a faint light. "I'm here," Danny called up the shaft. "Mr. Miller, Ben, Mrs. Miller," a voice answered from above. "Danny, is that you?" It was Ben Miller. Danny felt relief wash over him. They were alive. "I'm here to help," Danny called back. "Is everyone okay? Dad's hurt," Ben replied. "He fell when a meteor hit near the house and Mom twisted her ankle." Danny looked at the emergency shaft. It was about 15 feet straight up with metal rungs built into the wall. For someone with 2 good legs, it would be an easy climb. For Danny, it would be nearly impossible, but he had come this far. He wasn't going to give up now. Danny stared up the emergency shaft at the 15 feet of metal rungs that separated him from the Miller family. His arms were already tired from crawling through the narrow tunnel, and his weak leg throbbed with pain. But he could hear voices above him, and he knew people were counting on him. "Ben, I'm going to climb up," Danny called. "Can you help me when I get to the top?" "Of course," Ben Miller replied. "But Danny, are you sure you can make it? Those rungs look pretty far apart." Danny tested the first rung with his hand. It was solid metal, bolted into the concrete wall. The rungs were spaced for adult-sized steps, which meant Danny would have to stretch to reach each one. "I can do it," Danny said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Danny grabbed the first rung and pulled himself up. His weak leg dragged behind him, useless for climbing. He would have to do this with just his arms and his one good leg. The first few rungs were the hardest. Danny's arms burned with effort as he pulled his body weight up the shaft. His hands were wet from the flooded tunnels, and they slipped on the metal. Twice he almost fell back down. "Take your time," Ben called down. "We're not going anywhere." Danny reached the halfway point and had to rest. His arms shook with exhaustion, and sweat ran down his face despite the cold air in the shaft. Above him, he could hear the Miller family talking quietly. Frank Miller was groaning in pain from his injury. "Danny, how are you doing?" Captain Morrison's voice came through the radio on Danny's belt. "I'm climbing," Danny said, breathing hard. "Almost there." But even as he said it, Danny wondered if he really could make it. The rungs seemed to stretch forever above him. His arms felt like they were on fire, and his weak leg kept getting caught on the metal bars. Danny forced himself to keep climbing. One rung at a time, one painful pull after another. He thought about his family on the ship, waiting for him to return safely. He thought about the Miller family, trapped above him and depending on him for rescue. Finally, Danny's head emerged from the shaft into the Miller house basement. Ben Miller was there immediately, grabbing Danny's arms and helping to pull him up. "You made it," Ben said with amazement. "I can't believe you climbed all the way up here." Danny collapsed on the basement floor, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The basement was dark except for the light from Ben's flashlight. Water leaked from several places in the ceiling, and Danny could hear the sound of meteors hitting the ground outside. "Where are your parents?" Danny asked. "Upstairs," Ben said. "Dad can't walk very well. A piece of debris hit his leg when the meteors started falling, and Mom hurt her ankle trying to help him." Danny struggled to his feet, realizing he had left his crutches behind in the tunnel. Walking without them was difficult, but he managed to follow Ben up the stairs to the main floor of the house. Frank Miller was sitting in a chair, His left leg stretched out in front of him. His pants were torn and Danny could see blood on his leg. Rose Miller sat beside him, her foot propped up on a pillow. "Danny Walsh," Frank Miller said with surprise. "What are you doing here, son?" "I came to get you," Danny said simply. "The ship is waiting to take us all to safety." "How did you get here?" Rose Miller asked. "The paths outside are all blocked. Through the maintenance tunnels," Danny said. "I know the way back to where the ship can pick us up." Frank Miller looked at Danny with concern. "Son, I don't think—" "I can crawl through tunnels with this leg, and Rose can barely walk." Danny looked at Frank's injured leg and Rose's swollen ankle. He realized that getting them back through the narrow tunnels would be much harder than getting himself here. "There has to be another way," Danny said. Ben Miller went to the window and looked outside. "The meteors are getting worse. Some of them are huge now. And there's a big one coming that looks bigger than all the others." Danny joined Ben at the window. The sky was completely red now, filled with burning rocks of all sizes. The meteor Ben was pointing at was still high in the sky, but it was enormous. It looked like a small mountain falling toward the planet. "How long before it hits?" Danny asked. "Maybe 10 minutes, Ben said. "When it hits, it's going to destroy everything." Danny grabbed the radio from his belt. "Captain Morrison, can you hear me?" "We're here, Danny," the captain replied. "Did you find them?" "I found them, but Mr. Miller and Mrs. Miller are both hurt. They can't crawl through the tunnels." There was silence on the radio for a moment, then Captain Morrison spoke again. "We can see that big meteor coming. We have to leave soon or we'll all be caught in the impact." Danny felt panic rising in his chest. He had found the Miller family, but he couldn't get them out. All of his effort, all of his painful climbing and crawling had been for nothing. "There has to be another way," Danny said again. He looked around the Miller house, thinking hard. The front door was blocked by debris from a meteor strike. The back door led to an area that was on fire. The windows were too small for adults to climb through, but then Danny remembered something. When he was exploring the colony years ago, he had found that some of the older houses had emergency exits that led directly to the surface. "The Miller house was one of the oldest buildings in the colony, Mr. Miller," Danny said. "Does your house have an emergency exit?" Frank Miller looked confused for a moment, then his eyes lit up. "Yes, there's an old storm shelter exit in the back room. It leads to a tunnel that goes about 50 yards away from the house. Can you get to it?" Danny asked. "I think so," Frank said, "if Ben and Rose help me." They made their way to the back room of the house. The emergency exit was a heavy metal door in the floor. Ben pulled it open, revealing a tunnel that was much larger than the maintenance tunnels Danny had used. "This tunnel is big enough for adults," Ben said. "And it goes straight, so we won't get lost. But where does it come out?" Danny asked. "Near the old water tower," Frank Miller said. "It's higher ground, away from most of the debris." Danny got on the radio again. "Captain Morrison, can you pick us up near the old water tower?" "We can try," the captain replied. "But that big meteor will hit in about 8 minutes. We need to be airborne before then." Danny looked at the Miller family. Frank Miller was in pain but determined. Rose Miller was scared but ready to try. Ben Miller was strong and could help his parents. "We can do this," Danny said, "but we have to move fast." Ben helped his father into the tunnel while Rose Miller followed behind, limping on her injured ankle. Danny went last, moving as quickly as he could without his crutches. The tunnel was dark and cramped, but it was dry and clear of debris. Danny could hear the others moving ahead of him. Frank Miller groaning with each step but still moving forward. "I can see light ahead," Ben called back. "We're almost there." They emerged from the tunnel near the old water tower, just as Frank Miller had said. The area was on higher ground and had been hit by fewer meteors. But the sky above them was terrifying. The huge meteor was close now, and Danny could see that it was bigger than he had imagined. "There's the ship," Rose Miller pointed to the sky. The horizon's edge was flying toward them, its engines glowing bright blue against the red sky. But the big meteor was falling fast, and Danny could see they would not have much time. "Everyone, hold on to each other," Danny said. When the ship lowers the rope, we all go up together. The ship hovered above them, fighting against the winds created by the approaching meteor. A rope ladder dropped down from the ship's cargo bay. Ben, you go first, Danny said. Help pull your parents up. What about you? Ben asked Dot. Danny looked at his weak leg and thought about climbing the rope ladder. It would be even harder than climbing the metal rungs in the emergency shaft. I'll make it, Danny said. Just go. Ben grabbed the rope ladder and started climbing. Above them, the big meteor filled the sky like a second sun. Danny could feel the heat from it on his face, and he knew they had maybe 1 minute before it hit. Frank Miller grabbed the rope ladder next, with Rose Miller right behind him. Danny watched them climb slowly, Frank Miller pulling himself up with his arms while his injured leg dragged behind him. Finally, it was Danny's turn. He grabbed the rope ladder and started to climb. His weak leg useless and his arms already exhausted from the day's efforts, the meteor was so close now that Danny could see the details of its surface. It was going to hit right where the colony used to be. The explosion would destroy everything for miles around. Danny climbed as fast as he could, one rung at a time. Below him, the ground was getting farther away. Above him, he could see the open cargo bay of the ship and the hands reaching down to help him. The meteor hit just as Danny reached the top of the ladder. The massive meteor hit the planet with the force of 1,000 bombs exploding at once. The light was so bright that Danny had to close his eyes, even though he was still climbing the rope ladder high above the ground. The sound came a second later, a roar so loud it seemed to shake the entire world. Strong hands grabbed Danny's arms and pulled him into the ship's cargo bay. Just as the shock wave hit the horizon's edge, the ship spun sideways through the air, its engines fighting to keep it stable. Danny felt himself sliding across the metal floor until someone caught him. Got you, Ben Miller said, holding Danny steady as the ship rocked back and forth. Danny looked around the cargo bay. Frank Miller was lying on a stretcher, his injured leg being treated by Dr. Parker. Rose Miller sat beside her husband, her ankle wrapped in bandages. Tony Rodriguez was securing equipment that had been thrown around by the shockwave. Is everyone okay? Danny asked. We're all here, Dr. Parker said. Thanks to you. Through the small window in the cargo bay, Danny could see what was left of New Haven Colony. Where the settlement had been, there was now a crater so big that Danny could not see the other side of it. The meteor had completely destroyed everything they had called home. It's all gone, Danny whispered. The buildings are gone, Frank Miller said from his stretcher. But we're not gone. Our families are not gone. And that's what matters most. The ship's engines grew louder as Captain Morrison directed them away from the planet and toward space. Danny felt the familiar feeling of gravity getting weaker as they climbed higher into the sky. First Officer Carter came into the cargo bay. Captain Morrison wants to see you, Danny, she said. He's on the bridge. Danny realized he still did not have his crutches. He had left them behind in the maintenance tunnel when he went to rescue the Miller family. Ben Miller noticed him looking around. Here, Ben said, offering his shoulder for support. I'll help you get to the bridge. Danny walked slowly through the ship's corridors, leaning on Ben for support. Other passengers smiled and nodded at him as he passed. Word had spread quickly about what he had done. You saved them, Katie said, running up to hug her brother. You saved the whole Miller family. We all saved them, Danny said. The ship came back. The crew helped. Everyone did their part. Captain Morrison was standing at the bridge's main window, looking out at the stars. When Danny and Ben arrived, he turned around with a serious expression. Danny Walsh, the captain said. What you did today was the bravest thing I have ever seen. I just did what anyone would do, Danny replied. No, Captain Morrison said firmly. Not anyone would have done what you did. Not anyone could have done what you did. You knew those tunnels because you had spent years exploring them. You were small enough to fit through passages that would have stopped adults. And most importantly, you chose to help when it would have been easier to stay safe. Danny looked out the window at the stars. They were beautiful and bright, very different from the angry red sky they had left behind. Where are we going now? Danny asked. To a new colony, Captain Morrison said. A place called Hope Station. It's on a planet with blue skies and green forests. No meteor storms. Will we have new homes there? We'll build new homes, the captain said, all of us together. And Danny, I want you to help design the colony's tunnel system. You know more about underground passages than anyone. Danny felt a warm feeling spread through his chest. He had always thought his knowledge of tunnels was just something to keep him busy while other kids played sports. He never imagined it could be useful or that it could help save lives. I'd like that, Danny said. Ben Miller spoke up. Captain, my dad wants to thank Danny personally. Is that okay? Of course, Captain Morrison said. He's in the medical bay. Danny and Ben made their way to the medical bay, where Dr. Parker was finishing her work on Frank Miller's leg. The injury looked serious, but Dr. Parker said it would heal completely with time. Danny, Frank Miller said when he saw them. Come here, son. Danny approached the medical bed, still leaning on Ben for support. You saved my family, Frank Miller said, his voice thick with emotion. You risked your life to help us. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Mr. Miller, Danny said. You would have done the same thing for my family. Maybe I would have tried, Frank Miller said. But I couldn't have done what you did. Those tunnels, that climbing the way you found us in the dark, that took special knowledge and special courage. Rose Miller reached out and took Danny's hand. You're a hero, Danny Walsh, a real hero. Danny felt embarrassed by all the attention. I'm not a hero. I'm just a kid with crutches who knows his way around tunnels. Sometimes, Dr. Parker said, that's exactly what the world needs. Danny spent the rest of the day visiting with the other passengers on the ship. Everyone wanted to hear about his journey through the tunnels and how he had found the Miller family. Danny told the story many times, but he always made sure to mention how the ship's crew had helped, and how Ben Miller had been brave helping his parents Dot as the ship traveled through space toward their new home. Danny found himself at the observation deck with his family. Katie sat beside him, still holding her purple stuffed animal. Pete and Lisa Walsh stood behind them, their hands on their children's shoulders. I'm proud of you, son, Pete Walsh said. But I'm also glad you're safe. I was scared the whole time, Danny admitted. When I was climbing up that shaft, I didn't think I could make it. But you did make it, Lisa Walsh said. That's what courage is, being scared but doing what's right anyway. Through the observation deck window, Danny could see other ships in the distance. The entire colony had been evacuated, and they were all traveling together toward Hope Station. Hundreds of families all starting over in a new place. Will Hope Station be different from New Haven? Katie asked. It will be different, Danny said. But it will be our home. And we'll make it a good place to live. Will you still need your crutches? Katie asked. Danny thought about that question. His leg would never work properly. He would always need help to walk long distances or climb stairs. But today had taught him something important. I'll always need my crutches, Danny said, but that's okay. Everyone needs help with something. And everyone has something special they can do to help others. What's my special thing? Katie asked. You stayed with me when everyone else was running ahead, Danny said. You didn't leave me behind. That's very special. As the ship continued its journey through space, Danny reflected on everything that had happened. This morning he had been just a boy who was slower than everyone else, who needed crutches to walk, who spent his time reading instead of playing sports. Now he understood that those differences were not weaknesses. His quiet time in the tunnels had given him knowledge that saved lives. His slow pace had taught him to notice details that others missed. His need for help had shown him how important it is to help others. The stars outside the window seemed brighter now, full of possibilities instead of dangers. Hope Station was still days away, but Danny was not worried. He had learned that courage was not about being the strongest or the fastest. Courage was about doing what needed to be done. Even when it was hard. Even when you were scared. Even when everyone said you could not do it. Danny Walsh had found his courage in the dark tunnels beneath a burning colony, and he would carry it with him wherever the stars might lead. The ship flew on through the peaceful darkness of space, carrying its passengers toward a new beginning and a new home. Behind them, the planet with the meteor storm grew smaller and smaller until it was just another dot of light among the countless stars. But the memory of what had happened there, and what Danny had accomplished, would stay with them forever. It would become a story told to children on Hope Station, a reminder that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the most unlikely person can save the day. Danny smiled as he watched the stars, his crutches resting beside him, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead.